Hail, Veno Paññobhāsa. Welcome back to the Brian Rue Show.
Yeah, hail, Brian.
How we say the date for the audience for the sake of the future, centuries in the future, it's June 7, 2019. I wanted to ask you this time about the ordination of the nuns, just for the viewer. The ordination of the nuns died out about, I guess, 1,000 years, or was it 1200 AD, something like that, long after the Buddha. It's been brought back in the I guess 21st century or 20th century in Sri Lanka. It was a big issue in my Ajahn Chah tradition. Ajahn Brahm started ordaining nuns around 2011. So it was a schism amongst our monks. So for us, it was a big deal.
Yeah, Ajahn Brahm pretty much got excommunicated from the Ajahn Chah tradition.
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty friendly since. I mean, they've been getting pretty friendly since. But yeah, that was a schism though, because they're still ordaining nuns and the Thai tradition doesn't accept it. So I want to get your take on this.
Well, in Burma, it's just not an issue at all. Any woman claiming to be a bhikkhuni in Burma can get arrested for it. It's like every full moon day and new moon day, the Sangha is supposed to get together and do the Uposatha ceremony, where one of the monks recites the 227 Patimokkha rules. And in ancient times, they had the rule where one monk had to admonish the bhikkhunis on Uposatha day. And so before you do the ceremony, you have to make sure all this stuff is taken care of. And nowadays in Burma, I mean, for as long as I've been a monk, so probably hundreds of years before then, you just say there are no bhikkhunis. There are no more bhikkhunis. And that just sets aside that whole issue. And from the time I was a junior monk, before the whole ordination of bhikkhuni issues thing became an issue, I had people telling me the only way to revive the order of nuns, the Bhikkhuni order, would be if at least 5 ordained monks were to spontaneously transform into women. That would be the only way of doing it. And there are cases of that in the commentaries of a man just spontaneously turning into a woman.
Yeah, like, I've read those accounts. Hard to understand.
Yeah, I wrote, I published a translation of one of those stories on my blog.
I was reading your blog,
Yeah. So as for having bad thoughts about an arahant, he immediately turns into a woman as like karmic punishment. So I was told by serious Burmese monks that's the only way that you could revive the Bhikkhuni order, because it takes nuns to ordain nuns. So once the lineage is broken, you can't really get it going again. That's the traditionalist orthodox argument, that in order for a nun to be fully ordained, she has to be ordained twice, once by monks and then once by nuns. And if there aren't any more nuns, then to revive the whole tradition is a non-starter, because you can't have a new nun unless there are old nuns who ordains her, right? So that's like the main argument for the traditionalists. And then somebody like Ajahn Brahm, he just kind of took the authority of Gautama Buddha onto himself and just kind of decreed that you don't need to do that anymore. And he's been rejected by a lot of people for doing that.
Yeah.
And so you got the feminists who say he's like this great hero, and maybe he's even an arahant, and on and on. And then you've got other people saying that he's just kind of a hot shot trying to make a name for himself, and just his head is so big that he just took upon himself the authority of the Buddha by just sort of reviving the Bhikkhuni order by decree.
Yeah, I remember Ajahn J.O. Sarah spoke out about it at the time. There were some cross words, like our monks didn't accept it. Yeah, and Ajahn Sujato was kind of like his right-hand man in Australia, so they're all with him in Australia, that whole group.
Yeah, well, I guess they made a kind of an announcement that any monk who lived at Ajahn Brahm's place would no longer be allowed to stay at any of the other Ajahn Chah monasteries. So there was sort of a purge or monks just sort of abandoning the place who wanted the freedom to live at other Ajahn Chah places.
Yes, I
Although
mean,
whether they've changed their attitude with regard to that or not, I don't know.
I think it's a bit more flexible now. Just I know some of the monks and emails, and I know some travel around. Seen some are going to Australian monasteries.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well, it
sure, but I
wasn't
think it's
just that he ordained nuns. The story I heard was that he kind of pulled a dirty trick on some of the senior monks of the Ajahn Chah tradition, where they were going to come to his place in Australia to discuss the possibility of reviving the Bhikkhuni order somehow. And then before they even showed up, he went ahead and did it. So that apparently with the idea that they would just acquiesce to a done deal. They'd get to Australia, the nuns already been ordained, so they would just accept it. And instead, they felt really indignant that he had kind of played a dirty trick on them.
oh yeah, so he played his cards wrong then.
Yeah, so that was part of the argument they were having, is that they weren't necessarily against the idea of at least discussing the possibility of reviving the Bhikkhuni order, but just the whole way he went about it was considered to be really unethical or disrespectful to the senior monks in the tradition.
Yeah, Bhikkhu Bodhi, he wrote in favor of it at the time.
Well, of course, he's in favor of anything politically correct.
Yeah, he's a real liberal. Yeah, you could call him the social justice rainbow Pope of Buddhism. I thought that was a great line.
Yeah, well, that's what I call the Pope, the Catholic Pope. He's the SJW Rainbow Pope. You know,
yeah.
Bhikkhu Bodhi is sort of like the Theravada Buddhist equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I remember back at that time, I was in favor of it because, like, I wasn't thinking so much about the rules. I was thinking, well, the Buddha, he did have a lineage of monks. Did it die out around 1200 AD with the Muslim destruction of India?
That's what they say, but there are inscriptions in Burma of bhikkhunis at least as late as like the 16th century.
Really?
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, no one knows for sure how it died out. There's no record of how it died out, right?
Well, part of the reason is that the rules were stricter for nuns than they were for monks. There were a few ways in which nuns had it easier. Like they were allowed to cook their own food, whereas monks aren't. But for the most part, it's much stricter. Like there are 4 Parajika rules that if a monk commits any of these 4 rules, he's excommunicated for life. Whereas with nuns, there were 8 of them. And there's just more rules and it's stricter. And part of the reason for that is that going all the way back to the origin of the Bhikkhuni order, according to the Pali text, the Buddha did not want to ordain nuns. He thought it was a horrible idea. And so reluctantly, he allowed it, but on the condition that even the most senior bhikkhuni has to bow to even the most junior monk. And so part of what's going on now is you've got these bhikkhunis, or these women, want to be ordained as nuns, but right off the bat, they don't follow the rules. Because it's just this bizarre situation where they want nun ordination for the sake of gender equality, but the Bhikkhuni order is completely biased against women. So it's not gender equality. So then after kind of, arguably breaking the rules in order to become bhikkhunis, then they just kind of ignore the rules anyway. Or maybe
so they're feminists. They're feminists.
Yeah, it's essentially, it's more political correctness than Dharma. This is more of a political issue than a spiritual one, definitely. Because there's no reason why any group of women can't dress however they want, follow whatever rules they want, call themselves pretty much whatever they want. But this whole issue is about official status with the name Bhikkhuni. So the whole thing is worldly official status, because it would make more sense just to create a new order that isn't called bhikkhunis. They're not officially bhikkhunis, but then they could have whatever rules were appropriate for modern times. It wouldn't be like biased or prejudiced against women so that they wouldn't be compelled to break the rules.
Well, Ajahn Sumedho at Amaravati in England, he had an order of women like that. They weren't called full bikinis, but they had different rules, and he had women.
And there are nuns in Burma called Tila Shin, and mostly they just follow 10 precepts or maybe 8 precepts. So that would, to me, that's the obvious thing to do, would be for women to just create a new order of kind of quasi-nuns. They wouldn't officially be bhikkhunis, but they wouldn't even want to be official bhikkhunis anyway if they have to follow the rules. So they have to break the rules in order to be official bhikkhunis. Like it's against the rules for a bhikkhuni even to sit cross-legged. That's against the rules. And so they just break the rule. They don't, they want the name bhikkhuni. They want official status, which from my point of view is just worldly bullshit. They're supposed to renounce that. This whole concern with worldly status, official status, that's one of the things you're supposed to renounce. So, yeah, it's just, they should just create a new order with whatever rules seem appropriate. And they'd be technically lay women, but then again, lay women are treated better than bhikkhunis anyway, according to the monastic discipline for monks. So it's just kind of a dumb political correctness issue as far as
of all the people who took my courses, like 15,000 over a year, one woman she ordained as a nun, INML. She ordained at Spirit Rock, about 10 years ago. The big nuns, several nuns ordained at that time. I was quite proud of her because only one from my classes actually ordained as a nun. But she's one of these, through the Taiwanese ordination procedure, she became a nun. She just lives a couple of blocks from me now, so she's sort of doing her own thing.
That's an argument that they've used, is that, like I said before, it takes nuns to ordain nuns. So what they're doing is they're saying that these Taiwanese Buddhist nuns count as bhikkhunis, which is hardly likely, because technically you have to do the ordination ceremony correctly in accordance with the Pali texts in order for it to be a valid ordination. And I think it's extremely unlikely that a Taiwanese Mahayana organization or an order is going to be doing their ordinations strictly in accordance with the Theravada Pali text.
Because it's Mahayana, of course, which is so far from our teaching, so far from the Buddhist teaching.
Yeah, and it's probably all done in Chinese and all that, and it's not Theravada, it's some other sect that probably is not considered, it would not technically be valid from a Theravadan point of view.
Yeah, so they do that to become ordained nuns, and then they practice Theravada to try to be Theravada nuns. Yeah.
So from my point of view, I'm willing to accept whatever the Sangha agrees to, but it would take a great council, as far as I'm concerned. It would take the consent of a great council that their authority could reestablish the Bhikkhuni Order.
That's the proper way of doing it, right?
That's fine, and they can, more power to them. But
the last one was like 1956, the last great council, right?
And I think it's extremely unlikely that a bunch of conservative Asian monks are going to revive the Bhikkhuni Order, because these great councils, really all they do is they just like make adjustments on punctuation marks and a letter here, a letter there in the text. It's like they correct a little bit of spelling or something, and that's pretty much all they do. They're so conservative that they're not going to do anything controversial. Like in 1956, there was a Western Buddhist who brought up the issue of smoking tobacco. Should that be allowable for monks, or would that count as like an intoxicant or something? And even that was just too controversial, and they just shelved it. They wouldn't discuss that.
Yeah.
And so these conservative Asian monks, who are 99% of the Theravada Buddhist Sangha, they're not politically correct. They don't give a shit about feminism, and so the only way that you can have bhikkhunis is for Western liberals and a few sort of fringe monasteries to jump on the feminist bandwagon and be politically correct and say, yes, they are in fact bhikkhunis because of this argument and that argument, which really doesn't hold much water. And even if they were fully ordained bhikkhunis, they still don't follow the damned rules, because the rules are sexist against women. So the whole thing is just insane.
Yeah, I know when I lived at Amaravati, the women...
insane, just call it silly.
Yeah, the nuns didn't want to be admonished by the monks at Amaravati. They told me, well, they didn't really want to do that, so they stopped doing that. But back when this happened around 2011, I was in favor of the ordination of nuns just because, the Buddha had a lineage of nuns, and it's a shame that it died off. I thought because the Muslims wiped out Buddhism in India, like head office was wiped out in the colonies like Sri Lanka or Burma or Thailand, that they let it go because the center wasn't held together, and then maybe the masculine societies didn't want it. So I thought it'd be nice to bring it back.
I don't think it was like that. Like most of India wasn't Theravada Buddhist anyway. By the time the Muslims arrived, almost all of the Theravada Buddhists were in South India and Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why Theravada survived and other of the ancient schools didn't, is because the Muslims didn't have boats, so they couldn't get to the island of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I know. It's great that we survived there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I thought because the Buddha had a lineage of nuns, I thought, wouldn't it be good to have it if they did go by the rules where the monks are senior and nuns are junior? I thought it'd be a good thing to have, but it seems to me like you don't have to have 5 nuns if they really want to get it going. They could find a way to get it going. And also, isn't it true that since the 1990s, the Sri Lankans have had one of the great monks there ordained women since the mid-1990s? So Sri Lanka actually has bhikkhunis in Sri Lanka. They did it before Ajahn Brahm.
You can say they actually have bhikkhunis, but technically speaking, there's always going to be monks like probably Ajahn Thanissaro down by San Diego who are just saying it's not valid. You can do the ceremony. I mean, this is part of Vinaya, the rules of monastic discipline, that, you know, like a monk commits one of the offenses that automatically excommunicates him. Then even if he doesn't tell anybody, even if everybody considers him to be a real monk, he's just not a real monk anymore. And so it doesn't matter if lots of monks believe that these women are really ordained bhikkhunis. If strictly speaking, it is not valid the way they did it, they're not bhikkhunis. It doesn't matter if everyone calls them a bhikkhuni.
Yeah, I understand that. That's true legally from a Vinaya perspective, yeah.
Yeah. And also, of course, there's the whole idea from the very get-go that the Buddha thought it was a horrible idea for nuns to be ordained in the first place.
But he did do it. He did decide to do it, though. So it was valid, right?
Yeah, it was valid. And then he made these rules that made sure that the bhikkhunis, the rules were stricter for them, and they always had to be secondary to the monks. And then nowadays, that's one of the things that the liberals or the ultra-liberals are doing, the feminists, is they're saying, well, the Buddha couldn't have really said that, because if he was wise and fully enlightened and all, then, of course, he'd be a politically correct feminist.
Could they argue that he was going along with the culture of his day? His culture was conservative. Women were like a man's property. So to get along with that culture, the Buddha had to have women in a subservient role.
Yeah, but you can't just change the rules.
Yeah.
That is just... You can try it. You can say we change the rules, but for any really strict monk who understands how Vinaya works, it's not changed.
But with the rules,
you can say that we're going to change the ordination procedure, but that just makes them invalid.
But just to restart it, like if you have the rule to have 5 nuns, couldn't they get over that rule?
The authority of a great council, like I said.
Yeah.
If you've got the Sangha or like a representative sample, you know, the representatives of the Sangha of the 4 quarters who officially announce, okay, we're going to allow bhikkhunis to be fully ordained, then I would consider that to be, you know, uncontroversially valid.
That's true. But so you wonder, why didn't they do that at the previous councils? Like it went on for 2,000 years in nuns.
It wasn't even an issue in 1956.
Yeah, but for the last 500 years we haven't. Why didn't in any previous council last 500 years? Why didn't they reinstate?
Because feminism wasn't a big deal then.
Yeah,
there was already nuns. This, like I said before, this whole thing is over political correctness and the official status of the word bhikkhuni for the sake of gender equality. It has nothing to do with actual dharma. Because any group of women can dress any way they want, they can follow any rules they want, and I mean, that's good enough. You know, it's not the official status that gets you enlightened.
That's true.
It's not the official status of being fully ordained that determines whether you're going to be enlightened or not. But they just want this official status for the sake of gender equality, and it's a political thing. It's really not a spiritual thing.
I'm not thinking from a feminist perspective. Let's say since the 1500s, like 1700s, like status is okay. It's okay that a senior monk has more status than a junior monk. Status itself is not a problem. So why couldn't bhikkhunis have the status of being a bhikkhuni if they chose to reactivate it? Like, why couldn't they have reactivated a previous council? I mean, it was okay for 2,000 years, so why not?
Nobody wanted to revive it.
Okay, that's the reason then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the women weren't demanding gender equality 500 years ago. That's a new thing.
Yeah.
And most women didn't even want to follow the rule. That's why the Bhikkhuni order died out, is because the rules were so strict against them that most women just didn't want to do it. They'd rather be like a 10 precept nun. And it's easier that way, and you're not going to be breaking the rules, because these bhikkhunis are just breaking rules right from the very get-go, because the rules are biased against women. They're fighting for the sake of political correctness and gender equality to revive an order that is sexist and discriminatory against women, which is just absurd. And so then, of course, they just have to redefine what bhikkhuni means, like leftists redefine any word that's inconvenient.
Well, then it's not bikini. If they're not going by the Buddhist rules, they're not really bikinis. Bikinis, yeah, that's true. Bhikkhunis, I know, yeah. Yeah, if they're not gonna go by those rules. I'm just wondering, why didn't somebody want to revive it? Those 100 years.
Feminism hadn't been invented yet.
Well, I'm saying even without feminists, why wouldn't Buddhists want an order of nuns? You know, if the Buddha had it if he had it for 2,000 years, even without feminism.
If women didn't want to be nuns, and then the Buddha thought it was a bad idea anyway, then it was just problem solved.
Yeah, but they did. They did. I guess there's always some women who do want to be nuns. So how was the decision made in Sri Lanka? It wasn't Western feminists that did it? Was it Sri Lankans themselves that did it? Right?
I have no idea. It was just a monastery in Sri Lanka. They just decided.
Yeah, Sri Lankan.
They were probably Westernized. I would bet that they were Westernized and had like Western liberal ideas.
Could be, yeah. Yeah. So the so-called Bhikkhunis have today, they're not being second to the monks. They want equality. So they have the status.
Complete gender equality. That's the thing.
So they're not allowing themselves to be admonished every 2 weeks by the monks.
Yeah, they're probably breaking lots of rules. Probably sitting cross-legged even.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I think it's against the rules even for a bhikkhuni to sit down in the presence of a monk. She has to remain standing in the presence of a monk, which of course that one's not going to fly either. There's all these rules that.
And why would they want that ordination? You're right. Why would they want that?
Just for the official status of the name bhikkhuni. They want the official worldly status of the name bhikkhuni, and that's what the whole argument is about.
Yeah, like in Thailand, they have the 10 precept machis. It'd be easier just to be a machi. You could sit down.
Or if you wanted to follow extra rules, you can follow as many rules as you want.
Yeah. And they can still get enlightened. You're right. Anyone can get enlightened if they practice.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the obvious best choice is to revive just to make a new order of nuns from scratch, and they wouldn't.
I guess what Ajahn Sumedho did was good. Back around 1979, it's been 40 years now at Ajahn Chah tradition in the West. He had this order of nuns,
and technically, from the point of view of Buddhist monastic discipline, they'd be lay women.
Yeah.
But so what? Most of the Catholic nuns you see at grocery stores technically are not fully ordained nuns.
Yeah.
They're like lay sisters or something. It'd be like that.
Yeah, it does cause tension in the Sangha. It's too bad that it's probably being led now by feminists, all these nuns.
Yeah, probably in the West.
And some of them could be lesbian feminists, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Because I know that they're in California, there's a nunnery there.
Yeah, I met one of them once.
You know, I met them, of course. I lived at Amaravati in England for 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I got invited to some festival at a Sri Lankan monastery like 2 or 3 years ago, before I went back to Burma last time. And there was one of the new bhikkhunis was there, and fortunately we didn't have a conversation. So.
Oh.
But yeah, I noticed she was breaking rules all over the place. But so what?
When I lived at Amaravati in England, I was working in the kitchen one day with one of the nuns, Ananda Bodhi, and she was saying, well, the Tibetan masters are much better than the Theravada masters. And I realized a lot of these nuns were Tibetan Buddhists. There wasn't the money for Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, right? The Theravadans had more money, supported from Thailand and so forth. So these Tibetan Buddhists were ordaining in our Theravada monastery. That really bothered me because I was a Theravadan and I renounced the Mahāyanas. So a lot of them had more respect for Tibetan Buddhism. So some of our
there's a lot of that going on. Like when I was at Pandita Rama in Rangoon, I was there doing intensive meditation for a couple months, And there was a Korean Mahayana monk there wearing like the gray pajamas. And he didn't like that he had to go at the end of the line. He was treated not like a monk, you know. So he ordained as a Theravada Buddhist monk just while he was there. And really, he was a Mahayana monk at the same time, which is not really allowable. And then as soon as he left, he just, you know, took off the brown robes and put the gray pajamas back on.
Yeah, that's not right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And I might have told you once I met an Austrian Roman Catholic priest who showed up wearing monk's robes at my cave one time. And so he wanted to come back again. And I said, well, just don't ordain next time. You know, it's just you're still a Catholic priest, you know, you're not even a Buddhist, you know, how can you be ordained?
Why would you do that?
It turned out that he was ordained just as a novice, but still, I mean,
he's a Catholic.
As a novice when you're not even a Buddhist.
So what was his motive then?
He was just interested in Buddhism and wanted to practice meditation, and you know, he's a cool guy. And
actually, maybe it's sincere. I bet you a lot of Catholics are closet Buddhists, right? They're sitting there in the Catholic monastery reading Buddhist books.
Yeah, I learned a lot about Catholicism from him. He's really an intelligent guy.
Yeah, they got the infrastructure. I live shortly close to a Catholic church. They got the infrastructure there. I'm sure that lots of intelligent people are very well educated, you know, very contemplative. Yeah.
And there's like Thomas Merton, who was doing like Zen meditation every day secretly.
Yeah.
In addition to having a secret girlfriend for a while.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah. So what else about the Bhikkhunis? Of course, there's all these Mahayana Bhikkhunis. I guess we're more concerned about reviving it within the Theravada.
Yeah.
I don't know about Laos and Cambodia. I think Sri Lanka did it first in the mid-90s, and then Ajahn Brahm did it within our Thai tradition. Thailand, they don't see nuns either. There's no nuns in Thailand. It's kind of like a Sasquatch sighting. You would never see something like that.
Yeah. And then I'm pretty sure that in Burma it's just illegal.
Yeah.
So that's one reason, like from the earlier talk, it's one reason why the West doesn't like Burma, is they're just not politically correct and just don't give a damn.
Oh, yeah.
They do what they think is right in accordance with their own tradition, and they're not globalist enough.
When I was a monk, there was a Korean nun visiting our monastery. She stayed, so she was a Mahayana Korean nun. They let her visit. She functioned okay. But I wonder if these Sri Lankan Bhikkhunis, I wonder what would happen to them if they visited Thailand or Burma. I wonder how they would be treated.
In Burma, if they insisted that they were Bhikkhunis, they could get arrested.
Yeah. So I guess today is carrying on with Ajahn Brahm in Australia, because at least they're physically, geographically separated from Thailand as the Thai tradition. So they've ordained several women. I'm not sure how many. Do you know how many nuns have now? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Probably they have a few anyways. I guess it's probably growing. I remember Ajahn Brahm, he's trying to raise money for the nunnery, you know, because they had the nunnery there raising funds, because he can raise a lot of money, you know, building retreat centers and stuff. He's very influential and millions of hits on YouTube. So he's raising money for that. So it looks like it's probably going to continue on with it. Like he's probably something of a feminist monk, Ajahn Brahm. So it looks like it's going to continue on.
Yeah. Although probably at the present time, at least 98% of the Sangha thinks that it's not right and it's not valid.
Oh,
mostly
I didn't
because
ask about that.
99% of the Sangha is Asian.
I wonder how much of the Western, like we have like, how many Western monks are there in the Theravada? I know it's about 150 in the Ajahn Chah tradition. I wonder how many of the Western monks thinks it's wrong. Think the majority?
I don't know. I haven't really discussed the situation with other Western monks.
But it seems
the
the
politically
majority.
correct ones in the West, the more politically correct ones probably go for it.
But I guess in the Ajahn Chah tradition, we don't. I mean, they decided they don't. They didn't side with Ajahn Brahm.
Yeah, and I guess Ajahn Tanisaro in San Diego, last I heard, he was still saying it's invalid.
Yeah, what was his reasons? I know he was against it from the beginning. Do you know what his reasons were? Probably the
same as I already said. It's
what you expressed.
It's not technically valid the way they did the ordination ceremony. It's against the rules the way they did the ordination ceremony.
Yeah, of course.
Like one Ajahn, like Ajahn Brahm, does not have the authority to just take upon himself the authority of Gautama Buddha and just
Yeah, of
say
course.
you're ordained. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, of course. So at the time, I remember Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote about it. He's very convinced. Yeah, Bhikkhu Sodas, we can do it. Yeah, we can. And
Yeah,
I think, yeah, it's good.
probably whole books have been written on why it's okay, why they're really bhikkhunis. I
So
don't know
Bhikkhu
if
Bodhi's
any
probably
books have been
twisting
written
the
against
Dhamma,
it.
right? Bhikkhu
Well,
Bodhi's
Bhikkhu
probably
Bodhi,
twisting the Dhamma.
uh, I assume so. Yeah, he would have to. I
Well,
mean,
he's Jewish,
no
so it
matter
might be
how
their
you
motive as
twist it,
well.
you have to. I mean, you have to explain how it is that they could be fully ordained without being fully ordained by other nuns, by other
Yeah.
bhikkhunis. And so you either have the idea that you can just do it by decree, or else you've got the Taiwanese nuns that are like supposedly still legitimate bhikkhunis when probably they aren't. So the whole thing is, it's just people twisting things to favor political correctness, essentially.
Yeah, back at that time in 2011, I was in favor. It shows how much I've woken up since I was in favor of feminism back then, but I'm not now. Now I'm more conservative. I've woken up to the reality of the world.
Yeah, well, it all depends on what you mean by feminism. I think women should have equal rights and all that, equal protection under the law. But still, the person most qualified for the job should get the job. So that means there would be damn few female firefighters, for example.
Yeah.
Because now
Please.
they're having to reduce the qualifications, like the physical qualifications, especially in order to let women become like police or firefighters. But it's just political correctness, self-destructive, ultimately political correctness. Because, for example, if a female firefighter sees a 200-pound man lying unconscious in a burning building, what's she going to do? She can't pick him up. She's not strong enough to pick up a 200-pound or a 240-pound unconscious man. So she's just going to have to call a guy to do it. So it's, a man would do the job better. But instead, they hire women because of, political correctness and quotas and affirmative action and all that.
I see that with the police here in Canada, too. They actually discriminate against white men in favor of women.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, back to the Bhikkhuni thing. I guess Bhikkhu Bodhi, he found a way to justify it in his he's a rainbow pope.
They're gonna
Buddhism.
twist, they're gonna come up with some way. It's like backwards logic. Like in Ajahn Thanitharo's first book on monastic discipline, he was trying to explain how it is that monks eating cheese in the afternoon is okay. And it's not like, let's just go where the logic leads us. It's you start off with, it's okay. And then you back up on how, you try to find the most plausible justification for it. And so he comes up with this argument that maybe, just maybe, cheese is actually a kind of butter. And since it's okay to eat butter in the afternoon for a monk if he's sick, then cheese is just a kind of butter. And so that's the best he could come up with. But, you're going to come up with some sort of spin. You're going to have to come up with some way of justifying it because you start off with the idea that it's okay. Or it's like the way Jehovah's Witnesses interpret the Bible. They start off with the idea that it has to be 100% true. And then they just come up with whatever argument seems the most plausible as a way of justifying that. I used to think that in the Bible, Judas Iscariot dies two different ways in the New Testament. In one book of the Bible, he goes to the Pharisees and gives the 30 pieces of silver, and then he goes off and hangs himself. But in another book of the Bible, he keeps the 30 pieces of silver, buys this field, which is called, he buys the potter's field. And then while he's there, he falls forward and he hits a rock and splits open and his guts come out. And that's why it's called the field of blood, because Judas Iscariot died this bloody death there. Whereas in the other version, it's called the field of blood because they took the money that he gave back. They didn't want to put it in the treasury, so they bought this potter's field with it, with blood money. And so it was called the field of blood because it was bought with blood money. And so I'm thinking, there's no possible way Judas Iscariot could have died both ways. You know, he couldn't have kept the money and given it back. He couldn't have hanged himself and fallen onto the rock in the potter's field. So I thought, there you go. That is proof that the Bible can't be 100% true. Oh, how naive I was, because then I talked to Jehovah's Witnesses and they've got it all figured out. Nope, that's no contradiction at all. Okay, the way it worked was he gave the money back to the Pharisees, but then they bought the potter's field in his name. So it was the same as him buying it himself. And then what happened was when he hanged himself at the potter's field from a tree, and then a branch broke or the rope broke or whatever, and then he fell down and hit the rock underneath, and then it caused him to break open.
There you go.
No contradiction at all. It makes perfect sense. And that's the way people think. They start off with what they want to arrive at, and then they use backwards logic to just try and find any kind of justification or rationalization that will let them say this is true. And that's what they're doing with bhikkhunis too.
So you're not actually allowed to eat cheese in the afternoon if you're a monk?
In Thailand you are, but in Burma, no, obviously.
So you would say no. You would say no to the cheese.
Yeah, well, especially, what is cheese? I mean, cheese is...
It's a dairy product.
It's hardened curd. You take curd and you squeeze out the excess moisture and maybe add a little flavoring. So cheese is actually purer curd than what is called curd. It's a kind of purified curd. Yeah. It's curd with more of the moisture pressed out of it. And curd is not allowable.
You make me hungry.
Call it curd.
Yeah.
But in Burmese, the word for cheese is denge, which means hard curd. So it's not even controversial in Burma. If a monk would eat cheese in the afternoon, he'd also eat rice in the afternoon. There's quite a few of those, but they're just breaking the rule. They know they're breaking the rule. So in Thailand, they come up with these arguments because they start off like Ajahn Mun ate cheese in the afternoon, and Ajahn Mun was an arahant and he can't do anything wrong. And so, they have to come up with some way of justifying eating cheese. They start off with the idea that eating cheese is okay.
When I was a monk,
back up and come up with whatever justification they can for it.
They taught us when I was a monk, we could eat yogurt in the afternoon because it was a liquid like drinking milk. I didn't eat cheese, but I had yogurt and milk sometimes.
Yeah, that's not allowable either. And milk isn't allowable either. They say chocolate's okay too, so long as it's dark chocolate and doesn't have milk in it. But people just do what they want to do and then justify it. And that includes ordaining bhikkhunis.
Okay. Yeah, I actually learned from you because prior to this, I was kind of in favor of the idea of bhikkhunis. I didn't realize all this stuff about the rules.
I'm in favor of it so long as,
great counsel, the proper way. Agrees. Yeah, the proper way.
If you just got some renegade monks on the fringe saying there's bhikkhunis, and then, of course, all the social justice warrior and the progressive activists are saying, yep, there's bhikkhunis, well, they've got zero authority to change the rules.
So in the future out of this organization, if thousands and thousands of nuns grow out of this in the future from what a few monks did, then that could be a problem for the society then.
Yeah, potentially.
Wow. Yeah. How do you see this in the future, playing out in the future? Do you think it'll peter out again, or do you think it'll grow?
It all depends on who wins the culture war.
Yeah. We're in the culture war right now. We've got the SJWs and the feminists fighting against the conservatives. And they're really bashing us hard. Yeah,
so if the left loses the culture war, all the bhikkhunis might get fed to the Muslims.
Maybe that's a good note to end it on. But anything else you want to add about the bhikkhunis?
I think we probably said more than enough to get people on my case because of it. Because that's like the main political correctness debate going on in Theravada Buddhism.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we covered it. Very good.
Yeah, might as well. We're going to be politically incorrect. That's a good way for Theravada Buddhists to do it.
Right on. Hail, Venerable Paññobhāsa Mahatera. Hi, I'm Brian Rue. Please subscribe to the Brian Rue channel on YouTube.